I've heard this book many times, but it's never really been on my TBR. But then I went to Athens with my girlfriend on a vacation, and I finished the book that I brought way too soon compared to when we planned on going for a bookstore, because books are cheaper everywhere else than in Denmark. So we had to go for an emergency like bookstore trip, and we found a little one that had a few but not a lot of English books, and I couldn't really find anything. And then she showed me this and asked if I knew of it. I said I'd heard of it, but that was about it. So we got it for me, and I guess that's how The Book Thief ended up going from not being on my TBR, or just very, very low on my TBR, to being the next book I'm gonna read. Now, The Book Thief was written by Marcus Zusak in 2005. It has a movie. I haven't seen it. I think it's supposed to be good, but I don't know. And it follows a little girl she lives in Germany with her foster family during World War II, and how she steals books. But it's really not that part that's the main plot, and we'll get to that, I suppose. Oh, it's been a while since we did a review like this, but I like it. I'm glad. It has an astounding 2.6 million ratings on Goodreads and just about 150,000 reviews. And that's insane, and it stands at a very, very respectable 4.4 out of 5. So it's just so wild, and I think this must be the most rated book we've ever reviewed on this channel. Now, let's get to the cover. I fucking love this cover. I love it more than you can imagine. It's so good. It's perfect with Death and Liesel. Liesel's the main character. Basically dancing. And I like the little specks we get that are stars, because Death brings Liesel along and they're going up to heaven or the sky or whatever you want to call it, and it's perfect. I love it. I think it's so cute. What I don't like is this up here, the #1 bestseller, and the Penguin Random House logo on the bottom. Remove those and you had a perfect cover. And I like the on the back here, I know it's not the cover, but on the spine, I like that the stars and everything goes again. And here I think it's fine with the penguin logo, because that's like when it's on a bookshelf, that's what you're gonna be seeing. And then on the back we have all the usual stuff, and then we have Liesel and we have Death dancing distantly apart, still referencing the cover, keeping everything in. I love the art style. I think it's adorable. But let's talk the prologue. I don't think I've ever read a book where the prologue has chapters. I don't even know if I can call them that, because they're like a page or two each. I guess mini sections are better, but that also feels a little weird, but eh. Now, for the actual prologue, it's very factual, and that's a theme that's going to go through it. Is Death is very factual in the way he talks or writes to us. And it's almost spoiler-esque. Like, it almost spoils you the story, which I guess is fine. It's actually pretty fine. I'm not even in doubt. I actually think that's fine. It fits the book. It fits Death as a character. No nonsense. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's be honest. What's gonna happen? And the perspective of Death telling us the story is kind of weird to me. The book is written to have a certain distance between the story and the storyteller, and then also the reader. And then Death is just a bridge between all of us. Like, he is the storyteller, but he's also at a distance from the story, because he's not in the story per se. It's more like he's sitting across from you at a comfy table, telling you this story. And that's kind of interesting, while also at times going on tangents. And I like it a lot. It's super fun, but it's also very, very weird. And it took a while to get used to it, and it definitely slowed down the pacing in the beginning. Well, not the pacing of the book, but the pacing of the of my reading speed. But so not the pace. I guess you would call it the speed instead, or the velocity. Do you have a direction when you read? I guess you do, else you couldn't have speed either, because speed is just let's move on to part 1. it's a weird book to review, to be fair, and especially because the style of writing just continues on. Like sometimes the prologue is in a different style or a different prose, and then the rest is in a more normal. But here it just keeps going, and it's just there's these little notes from death. I don't know if I can do it like this and find them. Here, actually. These little notes from death, which are very, very cute, where he explains like German phrases or something about a character. When characters introduced, you get a little blurb from death where he's like, something about Rudy, he's gonna die. And like, okay, fair enough. And it kind of helps us with like both introduction, speeding those up and getting a feature for the characters, but also just it adds a bit of personification to death in a way. So one of the things is like when the Raynar family is introduced, we get some bullet points, and it fits Death because the book is written very factual. So of course Death is just like Miss Raynar, Mr. Raynar, and so on. Like it makes sense, but it's kind of weird in a way. So I guess for someone who can only observe, that makes a lot of sense. But to me, it's also a little, yeah. So the first part with the mom and the dying brother just sets the tone for this. Like it's so sad. And in general, any story of a mom having to give up a child to survive, like for the child to survive, because that's what she does to Liesel afterwards, it's just horrible, and it touches something, at least in me. Hopefully it does so in most people. But it just, it pulls in the heart right away. Yeah. And the family Liesel is gotten brought to is not someone you should be particularly proud of. The father, I don't remember his name right now. The father, I'm going to be calling him Papa and Mama for the mom in the rest of this because I don't remember the names right now. I might have written them in the script somewhere, but I don't remember. But the father is nice, but kind of reserved feeling here, whereas the mom is very much the opposite. And you are learning some interesting German words. Luckily, I don't remember them, because I don't think my mom would be proud of me. There's in general a lot of German swearing in this book, like not only from Mama, but from a lot of people. It also does the thing where you get some expressions in German and then repeat it in English right away, as if the person is saying, like, is repeating themselves. And sometimes Death will be the one translating for us. And I get why it's done that way, but it almost ruined the flow at times, at least in the start to me. But only almost. And like an example is, the street they're on is Himmelstraße, and Himmelstraße means Heaven Street. And that's a point where Death does one of his examples, because he goes, isn't that ironic, given that it's gonna be completely ruined by bombs? And they're like, I guess. And then at times they'll be like Scheiße Liesel, and it'll be like crap Liesel or something like that, like in the same sentence. And it's a little off-putting in the start, but you kind of get used to it. Oops, gotta pick. Oh, just need to scroll. Hopefully I remember to cut this out. Otherwise it's gonna be very funny later. Good, very good. So, throughout the story here, in the first section here, we also get a lot of descriptions of how Germany during the war will change. Just a few tidbits here and there, like the coffee bakery will, like coffee bakery cafe place thingy. The very very narcissistic woman will get you like have rare wares for the true supporters. So you do get small snippets of what's gonna happen just like that. Now, the story follows Liesel as she joins school, but is horribly behind the others, so are placed in the kindergarten until she's just too annoying. It's not a, oh, she suddenly got good. No, she's just started annoying everyone. But she really wants to learn to read a lot. Like, it's very important to her because of the book she, like, they say stole, but even Death admits that's a bit it's more like she found and never asked who it was from. That she found it at her brother's funeral. That's why it means a lot to her. So it's giving her the trait of a bookworm, which is an interesting one. It's usually a sign of someone who wants to expand their horizon and the world. But it's also something someone with a lot of compassion would be into, because you read stories where a lot of things like that can happen. So in a way, Sazak is telling us Liesel is not gonna be like the others. Like, we already know she's different due to her background, but now we know she's gonna be more different than the other Germans. She's going to want to see the rest of the world, and she's gonna want to show us a lot of compassion. The same is seen in her best friend Rudy, who is starstruck by the American black runner Jesse Owens. So much he actually does blackface. It's actually a funny section in the book. And we see here Rudy doesn't care for religion or color or the Nazi mentality towards non-white people. He likes Jesse because Jesse's cool and could run fast. You know, you say guys pick a trait and they stick to that forever, and Rudy's is run fast, be black apparently. At least run fast and be cool. And it's simple children's logic. It's really, really simple logic. But it shows he doesn't understand nor believe in the racism or the anti-Semitism we see in the adults. And it actually shows that just because you grow up in it, a child doesn't necessarily understand it. And I'm gonna harper back to one of my favorite books, which is To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird is kind of the same thing, and there's this one sentence that goes, shoot all the blue jays, but don't kill the mockingbirds. And that's a sentence to describe that if you take the blue jays as the adults and the mockingbirds as the children, don't go after the children. They are just following the adults, because that's what is usually what your mom or what your dad does or believe in. Is usually what you're gonna be doing too, at least until you get older. And the same thing here. Rudy does not care. He doesn't understand this horrible thing that the entire Germany just follows. He looked at Jesse Owens and went, that dude could run very fast, and that was cool. That's it. There's nothing more in it. And you can't blame him at all, actually. So it really shows us that a lot of like ingrown anti-Semitism, racism, it's not in the children. Now, let's move on. That was very, very serious. We also get a view of some Germans who aren't fans of the Nazi party, especially Rudy's dad. I know it kind of goes against what I just said, but at the same time, not really. Because Rudy's dad only supports the Nazi party because he's obliged to, and because he's told if they don't get rid of the Jews, they will take his job and put his family on the street. And he doesn't quite believe it, but he doesn't have the money to risk it. Even if it's just fake propaganda, he cannot take the chance. He has to believe that it's gonna happen and that he needs to follow the party line with that. But really, we all know it wouldn't have happened. But fair enough, you're from a poor place, a poor suburb from Munich. You do what you need to do. So you can't fault him. It's horrible, it's wrong, but you can follow the logic. And you can read a lot into this book and comment on modern society with this. And it is clearly written to make us do that. I'm not going to put too much into it in that direction, more than I already have. I'm going to do it a bit more, but it's not going to be preachy. But it does put into perspective why some people would follow an authoritarian leader, even when they don't technically believe the ideology. Now let's get to part 2. So this section is where the title comes into play. We actually get a theory of a book. Well, where it's an active decision, whereas before it was more of I have a book now. Now, the section starts out with a lot of happiness. It's Christmas and Liesel gets 2 books from Papa that she can read. They're getting more poor as time goes on due to the war, but Papa traded cigarettes for books. This is so sweet when you take into account how much that man smokes. Because Mama's gonna find a way to complain. And this is where we really get to see the love and the 4D chess of Papa. She wants a dress and some shoes, but since they're very poor, they can't afford it. And instead of getting her that, he gets her fresh eggs, using his meager cigarettes to barter for a few eggs. It's so sweet, and it really makes you smile because they are super poor. So the fact that he gives up what's very, very important to him just so to make others happy. It's a tremendous amount of human compassion we see. And it really made me smile a lot. And this book is gonna ruin that smile, trust me. So this is followed up by a lot of sadness. See, told you. That's what my script says. Mama is losing more of her customers due to the war, which means even less money. But Liesel decides to write letters to her actual mom, which is incredibly sweet, until you realize there's no way for her to get the letters to her mom, and she's most likely dead or taken to a concentration camp for being communist. Until then, I was smiling, but when I reached that point, my smile was gone. Completely. This book is sad and dark, and it doesn't hide anything from you as the reader. It puts it out there and shows the struggle of the poorest in the country, ravaged by a war started by a tyrant based on nothing. It's horrible and it's sad, but it's showing the humanity in the situation, and I feel like that's very important to keep in mind. Now, let's move on and try and keep a happy tone and thoughts for now. We're going to the preparations for the H-man's birthday. Actually, I'm just going to call him Hitler because who cares? So we're preparing for Hitler's birthday and all that entails. And for Liesel, who is fourth member of the BDM, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a Hitlerjugend for girls. Hitlerjugend is Hitler Youth, so for girls. And that means learning to salute correctly, marching, and looking proud of the country. Very important. And the birthday is celebrated with a giant bonfire, where anything that's remotely against the party will be burned. So a lot of book burning is happening here, and keep that in mind. The bonfire part itself is very short and actually not that important. A bunch of propaganda was spewed out, but afterwards is when it gets interesting. Liesel learns from Papa that it's unthinkable that it was the system created by Hitler who took her mom. Well, that it isn't unthinkable. There we go. Sorry. It isn't unthinkable that it was the Nazi system. And of course they talk about it, her and Papa, as if the man himself did it. Although you could make that argument, of course, but in reality, it's more likely he had no idea who Liesel's mom was. Actually, that's more realistic. But you could argue by starting all of this, Hitler basically doomed Liesel's mom. But still, that makes Liesel realize that she hates Hitler. And this is when it gets interesting, because Papa is only against it when it's in public. And that is because he knows how dangerous it is to hate Hitler. If the fanatic party members hear her say she hates him, she's gone. But it's okay that she says it at home. They might explain why Papa isn't a member of the party yet, but it's more so why they couldn't find the flag. They aren't supporters. They just aren't in a situation where they can survive to not be. Most people couldn't at this time. I think this is 1941 or 40, so in Denmark we couldn't either. Because they need to be keeping the appearance of being supporters, as to not risk being sent to a concentration camp themselves, as for being political opponents. And it makes you wonder how many more ordinary people are actually not supporters. I bet you it was quite a few when it comes down to it, especially of those who lived through and before World War I, who back then didn't care about the Jews. After this, Liesel finds 3 books that didn't burn in the bonfire and managed to grab one. But when she hides it, she realized someone was watching her, and that scares her a lot. I think she saw death. At least that's what I assumed when I read this. We learned later on it wasn't. Because he likes to be early when he can, so he can watch the colors, as he called it. We also admit he liked to watch her since she's interesting. He could also be a Nazi. I was a Nazi. But let me talk about Death and the color. So when Death has to describe he's getting someone, he doesn't talk about all the usual things. He cares more about the color that that person's death represent. And to me that's interesting. So when he's gone to some of the concentration camps, he talks about how it has every color of red, yellow, orange, and brown. Like all this fury, flame, the hatred, the fire of the party, the horribleness. And sometimes he talks about the blue. It depends on, again, who he's picking up. Because some blue colors, and that usually because there's a lot of peace, tranquility. It's really interesting. It's an interesting way of looking at death. Now, let's get to the third part, because this is a long book, and there's 10 parts in total, and we're already 20 minutes in. This section starts out exactly where the previous ended, and that's great to me. I love when a book does that, kinda, because why then add a part, but here it's mainly the parts are, these are the key points we're going to go through. And the book is doing a lot of time skipping. We're going through the entire war. And at times it is a little difficult to figure out when what is happening, because Death likes to go on tangents. I love that Papa isn't going to tell on her about the books she stole, but instead help her read them. But more so that the one who saw her is someone who's willing to show her many more books than she's ever seen before. Until now, the mayor's wife, Ilsa, have been a non-factor person, but now she's letting Liesel read her books. It's great to see, okay, there you go. It's really great to see someone who supports her like that, who isn't Papa, because honestly, Liesel needs more people to support her. Now the story gets a new POV, which is Max, the Jew on the run. Max is so far just an instrument to show us how a Jew would escape and run away from the government. So far he isn't really a character, but I'm excited to see what happens when he reaches and meets Papa and Liesel and Mama. We then see the natural progression for Liesel and Rudy. Of course, when you're poor and you see others have what you believe is rightfully for everyone, like you would see someone rich, in this case food, like what should be for everyone, you will convince yourself it's okay to steal. And in this case, they do that. And the entire thing ends up with them stealing a lot of expensive and important food meant for the priests. Do I like this section? It's fine. Yeah. What's more important is that it just shows us how bad the situation has become for ordinary and for the poor Germans in society. We start this section with some background story on Hans Huberman, Papa, as I've been calling. It was in the script, so when he learned to play the accordion, because that's something I haven't spoken about, but he does that every time. He's not the best, but it's a way other than painting that he makes a few bucks, and it's also just something that brings joy and happiness. And it also, his background also explains why he's sympathetic to the Jews in Nazi Germany. And it's honestly great and very sweet. It shows off the humanity in the man, that even during the war, World War One, he would rather just smoke his cigarettes than shooting the enemies. We also get why Max is going to Papa and Mama's house specifically. And that's great. I love that it makes more sense for why he specifically knew to visit Papa and not any other German film. I like we get that shown, not just told. And then we also get the story of Max, and that's a sad story. Holy shit, it's completely I'm gonna say it's completely unfair to Max, but please keep in mind whenever I talk about Max, he is a representation of every Jew during World War II. But what makes this really bad is knowing his story isn't even like unique. So that's why I use Max, because like why I think Max's story is super sad is we know he like you can find a million Jews, was 6 million Jews or something that died, and every one of them is gonna have a sad story. And Max is just one of them, even though he's a fictional character. It takes a while for Liesel to not be scared of Max, and that is understandable. Her already not the best in the best world has been turned upside down, and if she tell anyone about Max, Mama and Papa will most likely be taken away. But since she gets over the initial fear and starts talking to him, they learn they are practically the same in many ways. They both have nightmares about their past, and they are somewhat similar, at least in feelings. So they can bond over that. So Liesel has a lot of nightmares when she saw her dead brother in the train. And Max has a lot of nightmares from all the Nazi stuff against Jews. So again, not quite the same, but it's close to. We then get to Liesel's birthday, where she again against the odds gets another book from Mama and Papa. And this is wild to think about given how poor they are now. But the situation is very tense, and she's doing a great job for an 11-year-old. Naturally, Max couldn't get her anything for her birthday, since he can't leave the house and have no money. We'll get back to that. But first, I want to talk about how nice of a person Liesel is. She literally went out of her way when she saw a newspaper to bring it home just so Max would have something to do. She shows incredible compassion and humanity in the simple gestures. They could probably use it for something else, like rapping or, anything really. But using it to make a man feel a little more at home and welcome is something special. It will make a horrible, horrendous situation just slightly bit better. Now back to the birthday, where Max also shows how much he cares about Liesel. He can't buy her anything, so you have to make her something. What? Well, a book, of course. They're surrounded by paint, and the newspaper isn't worth much when it's read and the crossword has been completed. So he paints the entire newspaper white and makes Liesel a 13-page picture book, and that's really sweet. An entire thing is in the book. I don't know if I can quickly find it. But so actually, so good. There you go. So this is the section. Like that. This is just 2 of the pages, and it's super touching. And it actually made me very teary when I read the 13 pages he made her. The amount of emotion the man poured into those pages is insane. So far, the book has become a 10 out of 10 for me and might be my favorite book, along with To Kill a Mockingbird, for literally the same reasons. So, in section 5 here, we kind of get this analogy to gambling, and with a 7-sided die. Yes, it makes no physical sense, and that is why it's a perfect metaphor for cheating in a game. For the actual side, it shows us in snapshots how everything is nice and good. We get some of Max's dreams and some of his tasks he set for himself. But then we get to the 7th side, where everything crumbles and Liesel loses it. The mayor's wife have to stop having them clean their clothes, while she hands Liesel a book. And Liesel shows some of the things she's learned at home and are completely vocally tirading. Like she's just showing off all the best German clothes she's learned from her mama. And it makes sense. It does seem like almost a bribe, but it really isn't. And it's so fucking sad when you think about it. It is true everything Liesel says. It's also very hurtful and not very diplomatic. But that's because we as the reader knows Ilsa was not trying to bribe Liesel into being happy or think it was okay. She was actually trying to be nice. The immediate reaction from Mama is so out of character, yet also in character in a way. It's hard to comprehend She isn't angry or anything, she just accepts it. I suppose you could argue she knew all along it was a question about time more than anything else. But I think what's worse is the argument from the mayor and his wife isn't that they can't afford it, it's that it sends a bad outlook. It would probably have been better if they just have done it, have kept on doing, because they'll be like, we're trying our best to support the local communities. And when this section with Rudy getting his ass handled to him by multiple people and Liesel losing a book. Well, if not for Rudy. The entire part with Rudy getting trampled and losing multiple times was just sad to think about. Like, you couldn't help but cheer for him as he saved what was left of the book. And of course, in the best Rudy fashion, he asks for a kiss. In this section we get what I assume is the first diary of death, where he describes some of the atrocities we see, and it's bleak. Whenever Death describes anything, it's always monotone and without emotions, except for the colors again. It's where Death shines the most. He likes his colors and makes a great deal about what colors were there. And it was a tough read. It was like, this book is heavy, man. And it's a YA book. Holy shit. Now, after this, we get the snowman scene, and that was just cute. And it really felt like Max was becoming part of the family, and I'm super happy for them. And then Max gets sick, very sick. The only good thing we get to see is how much Liesel now cares about him, and it's a lot. She's begging Mama to get her ASAP when Max wakes up, and she gets him 13 presents. That might seem a little ordinary and boring, but they mean a lot to Max when he wakes up. We also get to see the more motherly side and human side of Mama. In general, she's growing on me. I didn't like her in the beginning, and she's becoming more and more of a person to me, and not just an annoying, angry woman. And the thing with the 13 presents is Liesel's trying to get him different things, and one of the things she gets him is a description of the sky at one point. And she told Mama to get her as soon as possible. So at some point, Mama shows up at the school and starts like berating Liesel for something she has no clue about. And then she realizes, oh shit, it means Max is woken up. So of course she's being pulled home to show Mama where the secret thing she hid from Mama was. You know. Now the visit of the Gestapo was intense. We don't actually know what happens to Max, so this could be where he is discovered. But instead, nothing happens, and Papa handles it with flying colors. He was right that it wasn't a search of the basement, but an evaluation. So it makes sense that they wouldn't search through the items, but more just measure and evaluate. Followed by Rudy being the cutest boy ever, just coming by to see if Liesel was okay when she was pretending to be injured. It was so cute and sweet. Followed right away by another of Death's diaries, this time with the bombing of Paris. The book really likes to make me smile just to tear it off again. We get these cute moments, and then Death is like, oh yeah, by the way, thousands died, now stop being happy. Man, this book. Let's move on. War's coming to Munich, and we see that with Papa suddenly having a lot of work to do, because he has to paint windows and blinds black. But we also see what a man he really is. Some peoples are technically speaking too poor to afford him, but half a cigarette or piece of bread with jam and Hans Huberman, Papa, is ready to get and go for you. It shows what an extraordinary man he is and the lengths he's willing to go to help others in need. With his paints, he brings people a hope of having a home when all of this is over. And with his accordion, he brings a sense of joy and respite away from the chaos and the sadness. This is important because we will see later. We will see this later be an important detail. So keep in mind the importance of the accordion. And we follow this happy sad section with Rudy getting his big win. Well, he wins 3 gold medals and tells Liesel he on purpose lost the 4th, which makes no sense But Max seems to understand why, even though he didn't say why. And it's so great to see Rudy finally thriving and be recognized for something. And I assume we'll learn later on why he deliberately didn't win 4 gold medals. And we also get a present from Ilsa, the mayor's wife, who gave Liesel a thesaurus and a dictionary, so when she reads her books, she can look up words she doesn't understand. And on a meta level, that now means that Dev is giving us definitions of words, as they represented different text pieces. Both works really well for the book. It shows us that Ilse still cares so much about Liesel and misses her, but it also gives Death another tool in writing in the story for us, and it's just amazing, and it's very cute. And the alarms are ringing. Get to the designated bomb shelters. But what about Max? You better hope he's okay, because sadly, he can't join. And this is the first time, but not the last, that the family have to seek shelter from the bombs. And everyone is very scared, and no one knows what to expect. Luckily, this time, no bombs. But Max gets an opportunity to steal a look at the night sky. And it's the saddest thing in the world how he describes the stars burning his eyes. He doesn't get out at all, and gets little to no light. Of course, it's a metaphor for missing his freedom, and it works, but it's just so fucking sad. Like, he's literally traded a prison for another prison. It's horrible in every way possible. But it doesn't take long though. The raids over Munich actually happen, and the fear bombs are now real, and everyone is very scared. And when the adults are scared, the children are frightened. But before we continue, I want to remind you that Hans Huberman played the accordion to soothe and relax the weariness of the people he painted for. In World War I, a friend taught him the accordion to prevent the soldiers from being too scared. Now less than a generation later, they're stuck in a cramped little basement hoping they will survive. But what takes the worst of their minds is the sound of a thief. Liesel might not be able to play music, and she can't sing, but she can read. And words have an incredible power. She manages to keep everyone calm, and even some of the youngest children fall asleep, like father, like daughter. Later we get the first Jew march through the city, and it's horrifying when you think about it. And what is worse is Hans losing his cool and helps a Jew. This of course gives him a whipping, and he's certain he is to be taken away. Here we see some of the others are helping him up and home. And I think it's because everyone understands what he was doing was a humanity thing. But what's to happen to him? Well, his application to join the party was approved, just so he can be sent away, since any member of the party would of course be happy to help with the war effort, right? So he's sent out as a cleaning crew after undoing the bomb raids. And that's insanely dangerous, and something that is basically suicide. And that part here is technically in section 9, but I wanted to mention it here. We will return when we get there though. The book gets sadder the further into the war we get. The more horrible the war gets, the darker the book gets. Let's get to part 8. All the while the Gestapo come for Ruby. He was too good at the festival, but his parents says no. So therefore his dad has to go and sew up uniforms for the front lines. Because you can't get the son, take revenge on the father. In this we get to see the saddest section so far. Everyone is missing Papa, and Rudy is missing his dad. Everyone is also missing Rudy's dad, of course. It's horrible and it's sad. And the only thing I can say is positive is the POV where Hans is. It's not good, but it's good to know he's alright and surviving. All of this is going on while Max has left their home. It isn't safe because Hans tried to help a Jew. Here he left a book he had been working on for Liesel, and we get a little bit of it. A story called Wordshaker. It's a great story that acknowledges that there are 2 types of people who can move the world with just their words. Firstly, it's Hitler, where Max does admit that even though he hates Hitler, Hitler is a smart and talented man, and the other is a person like Liesel, those who can inspire hope and understanding in the darkest of times. The story is followed by hand-drawn images, and in the book we see it written and drawn how Max did it to Liesel. It's incredibly moving and beautiful, and I do believe it's true. Liesel had the power to move people with her words. We've seen it in Malking, and I'm sure it would be the same everywhere else she would go. We start this section with a cute theory part for Rudy and Liesel. It's cute because they're acting so much like a couple. We also get a confrontation between Lisa and Ilsa. This is amazing. We see them make up and Ilsa actually talks in a full sentence. This is immediately followed by Hans being in the cleanup crew, where we learn something important about him. He's a good card player, but still very charitable. They play for cigarettes, and even though Hans has won multiple rounds, he shares his spoils with the others. And that's because they're just there. They're trying to drive time, so it's great sportsmanship, and it shows he's a great friend. Next time we see him is right around the car crash, where he could have died. Given the know he's going to, but not now. This does keep the stakes high, but instead of sadness, it transformed into happiness when we learn his broken leg is a blessing in disguise. They'll send her home because of it. Because he can't work out there anymore, so he has to do a desk job in Munich. Of course we see happiness all around for it, but understandably, Rudy is jealous and upset. His dad isn't coming home, and Rudy knows who is the reason, the higher-ups. Now Rudy can't get to Himmler or Hitler, he can get to the rich people of Malking. So that's the plan. But Rudy isn't in it properly, and ends up not doing it. Instead, we get to see the true humanity, the true person in Rudy, when a British fighter pilot crashes down and are dying. Rudy hurries over and grabs a teddy bear and laid it next to the man in a gesture to calm him down in his final minutes. This man who was supposed to be his enemy. They were bombing his home, his friends, his life. Yet Rudy tries to make a man's final moments, sorry the pun, bearable. If that isn't empathy and humanity, I don't know what is. Something I haven't talked about is how Liesel is reading for her mother's nemesis for some extra coffee. The woman has 2 sons. One of them dies in Stalingrad, and the other, Michael, survived. Now Michael feels guilt for surviving. He wants to live, and that makes him feel bad. Survivor's guilt is a real thing, and I won't pretend that I know anything about it. But I do believe you should never feel bad for being alive, no matter what. The guilt gets to him, and he ends up committing suicide. This book gets tougher and tougher. But we end the story with a happy note. Papa is home. This is the first section where I actively cried. And I had to stop reading the book multiple times. I even had my girlfriend comfort me. The book hits you in the face with emotions. It makes you care. It makes you care about everyone in Malking. And then it rips them to shreds, right in front of you. It's a brutal book. It's heartless. But it's so good. Let's get to the final part. Following Papa home, we get the chapter called The End of the World, Part 1, which is where Himmel Street gets bombed, and we learn Liesel is the only survivor. Shit, that's a hard slap after getting Papa home. Susak really hits in the right place with his writing. We then get a flashback to what happened before the bombs. Michael, the survivor's guild brother, commits suicide. His suicide is described here in details, including the letter he wrote to his mom. I won't go into detail, but it's dark, it's heavy. We also get a reference to Max being taken by the Germans, but alive, and are looking for Liesel when he's out and cleaning the city as forced labor. This is shortly followed by Max and Liesel actually reuniting for a short moment, as Max is marching through Malking. It's incredibly sweet, but also very sad, because you know what is happening to Max and why he's there. You're so happy for them, but you're also sad. As Liesel has pointed out, every day we don't see Max means he might not have been taken. When we see Max, we know he's alive, but taken. This is right up to Liesel telling Rudy everything, and Rudy just accepting it, seeming more surprised that she has told Max about him, more than anything. To get cheery, Liesel seeks refuge in Ilsa's library, hoping the books would cheer her up, but she ends up ripping one to shreds. And in show of guilt, she writes a letter apologizing and putting herself into imposed exile. And this is where we see some more amazing humanity. Ilsa asks Liesel to tell her it's okay, but also to give her a book, to write her own story. It's so sweet, and it shows Ilsa understands Liesel better than anyone. Well, perhaps except for Papa. So Liesel starts to write. She writes a book called The Book Thief. And we get a small montage of Liesel in the basement writing the book with paragraphs from different pages. But also the ending line. I have hated the words, I've also loved them, and I hope I've made them right. Sorry. It sums up everything about books to me. Speeches and the power of words. It sums up the meaning behind the word shaker. It's also an incredibly perfect line to end this book with. But the book isn't over. We get description of how the Allies fooled the Germans so they could bomb Munich. And I'll spare you for most of it, we get a description of how everyone died. How they died and how their souls greeted death. Yeah. I had to stop there. Writing the script of the video made me teary just thinking about it. Talking about it now. It brings up a lot of emotions. I'm so sad for all these characters and for the people who actually had to live through this. And I hate Susak for doing this, but I wouldn't want it in any other way. The final section of the book is how Liesel reacts to seeing Mama and Papa dead. It's horrible, it's sad, it's bleak, but the book she wrote is lost to everyone but Death. Death took the book when Liesel by accident left it. Great parallel to the start of the book. And that is how he can tell us the story. It's brilliant. I love it. Let's get to the epilogue. It's about as short as the prologue, so giving its own section might seem a little odd, but I think it deserves it. This is the section that really broke me. The entire thing just hit me, because it's a wonderful ending to an absolutely amazing book. I can't stress it much how much this ending was needed. The way Death and Liesel talk, when he shows her the book as if they were old friends, was perfect. The parallel to how Hans greeted Death as a prepared man. For Liesel, Death was a consistency. Someone who was there from the start and watched over her. He's haunted by humans. The humans are haunted by death too. Final section, we also get exactly what we needed. We saw what happened to Liesel. She lived a long life in Australia. Yeah. It's a horrible book in every way you could imagine it. And I hope we'll never ever have to go through something like that again. Let's get to the conclusion of this book. What's there to conclude? The book is amazing. I think it might be my favorite book along with To Kill a Mockingbird. I can't decide which one I like the more. I think I cried during the book thief. I haven't cried from To Kill a Mockingbird, but both of them hits me, and hits me in different ways. Marcus shows exactly how you can write a YA book that doesn't talk down to the audience, but challenges their perspectives, challenges their understanding of narration, of writing, of themes. It's a powerful book, And you would fear it would show the Nazi Party in too positive of a light. But it doesn't. When it actually is political, it's very much against the Nazi Party. It also doesn't try to excuse the people who joined the party out of fear. Because you could be tempted to do that. I've been tempted to do that. I might have done it a little. But the book doesn't do that. But it does show how and why some people still felt they needed to. Moreover, it also shows us not all Germans agree with what we're going on. But it also shows us humanity. And it shows how some people, how far they can go for others in the darkest of times. The Book Thief is about a girl. It's about a girl who likes books. And how she shows incredible humanity through the darkest of times, even though death and all the other people are ripping everything from her. She still managed to find happiness. I can only recommend this book.